Because of the explosion, the FBI is brought in and they're interrogating a few people, including Ruth. They're trying to force Ruth to give them some information, but Helen Pierce is her lawyer and is reluctant to do so. This investigation is run by Agent Evans, although Agent Miller is in the room. She's just not saying much. And as they're trying to leave, Agent Evans tries to play the emotional card by bringing up Ruth's dead dad, but Ruth doesn't take the bait. When she gets out of interrogation, Ben is there waiting for her and says, "We gotta go, we gotta get out of here." But Ruth says that's gonna be a massive red flag. I can't just pick up and leave. She also asks him if he's feeling alright because he seems out of sorts, and he knows right away that Wendy told her that he's bipolar. He says she doesn't know what she's talking about. "I've lived most of my life without those pills. This is me." But Ben is the only one who's freaking out a little bit because Frank Cosgrove is also freaking out. He just lost 3 of his men, and his son is getting called in to get interrogated by the FBI. Marty lets him know that this is all in retaliation because of the drug war in Mexico, and Frank Cosgrove wants to know how exactly Ruth came out of this unscathed. He's painting a picture like Ruth set them up, but Marty says don't even go there. That's not even close to being accurate. Marty tells him that cooler heads need to prevail right now. When Marty gets back from meeting with Frank, he's told by Helen that the members of the rival cartel that blew up the truck have left on a private plane. She also lets him know that during the interrogation, Agent Miller wasn't exactly in their pocket. And as she's telling Marty how he needs to speed up turning her, Wendy gets a phone call from Omar. He wants to know the latest with Agent Miller, but she lets him know that he did a lot of damage when he castrated that horse because it ruined their brand. And right now, their brand is his shield. The better that they look in the community, the less heat they get, which means the less heat he gets. As soon as she gets off the phone call, a fancy sports car pulls out front. And to Marty's surprise, it's their therapist who bought a McLaren with the money that she got for keeping quiet. And she's curious if that truck explosion is the drug cartel. And while Marty is trying to tell her to go away, she doesn't realize that she's saying all of this in earshot of Helen Pierce. So later that day, Helen Pierce visits her and is feeling her out and decides the best course of action is to send a goon to take care of her. That thug actually goes through a mini therapy session before killing her, grabbing all the information off her computer, the file for Wendy and Marty Bird, and wiping the computer clean. He also destroys the car, and as him and Helen are watching the car sink to the bottom of the lake, Helen asks, "Do you ever get tired of this?" And he says, "Not really." She says, "Good, then keep your schedule open." But now it's Marty's turn to go talk to the FBI, and as he's walking in the station, he sees Frank Cosgrove leaving, who mean mugs the shit out of him. And as soon as he gets in there, Agent Evans is asking about Marty's relationship with the men who were killed, but Marty says, "I don't really have a relationship with them." And Helen Pierce is able to figure out that the one was a CI, which is probably one of the reasons why Evans is really pissed off because he just lost his in with Marty Bird. And now they're wondering if Marty is a murder suspect because the picture that is being painted is that Marty found out about Tommy and decided to have him killed. And as Helen and Marty are leaving, they both know that the FBI is trying to get either the KC mob or Ruth to turn on them and give them up. And it's true, because as Ruth Langmore is walking through the casino, she encounters a very drunk Frank Cosgrove Jr. who is mourning the loss of his friends who died. And Frank is convinced that Ruth set them up because Ruth changed the drop location at the last second. And all of this is from the information that the FBI gave him in that interrogation. Ruth tells him that she didn't do anything and also tells him, "You need to go home." But Frank doesn't go home. He stands outside and waits for Ruth to leave, and when she does, he beats the shit out of her. And Ruth is in really bad shape. Ben has actually changed his plans. He was planning on leaving town, but he's decided to stay to take care of Ruth. And she's got a steady stream of visitors, but one of them isn't Wyatt. So 3 heads up to Darlene's farm and tries to talk him into visiting her in the hospital. But Wyatt refuses to do so. He wants to know what the hell happened between the two, but Wyatt just says it's complicated. Later that night, Darlene presses Wyatt for information, and Wyatt reveals that Ruth killed her dad. Darlene says, well, she probably had a good reason, and Wyatt says she was defending Marty Bird. And that's a trigger point for Darlene, who says the birds get their claws in you and they don't let you go. They turn people. They turn people into something that they're not. Through this conversation, Darlene actually reveals that she killed her husband, which takes Wyatt off guard, but he's brought back into it with the message of the birds are terrible people. But the birds are pissed. Marty heads to meet with Frank Cosgrove and he tells him, your boy crossed the line. That's an adult beating on a girl. And you had a CI working on your crew. Lord knows how much information he gave the feds. So you know what? Our partnership is over. Frank asks if he really wants to do this. And Marty stares him in the face and says, if you come after me, my family, or Ruth again, the next time you see your boy, he's going to be hanging from a bridge in Juarez. So while he's dealt with the KC mob issue, he still hasn't been able to turn Agent Miller. She's proved to be really difficult. It's gotten to the point where he thinks he might need to go to somebody else. And Wendy says, you know what, let me take care of that. Because she's meeting with a senator from the list of names that Jim gave her. And he's got further political aspirations and he's interested in the foundation. And he's also from the area, so he's aware of that case that Marty found. So Wendy gives him the information to which he gives to the FBI. And now the FBI is pressuring Agent Miller to reopen the case. But Marty is pissed at Agent Miller because she didn't stick up for them in the interrogation. And in his mind, mind, because she let Agent Evans paint that picture, she's as guilty as Frank Cosgrove. She basically allowed Ruth to get her ass kicked. And she's also harassing their gamblers. Sam was gambling, doing as he was told, and Agent Miller figured out how much money he's lost and decided to scare him a little bit by telling him that she thinks he's committing a crime and the IRS will be in contact with him. Although Marty told him that he's not committing a crime and that being a shitty gambler isn't enough to get the IRS looking into his finances. But Agent Miller lets him know that until he comes over and works for them, she will come after him every single day. But since her pleas are falling on deaf ears, she decides to head to Wendy to talk some sense into her. She pleads with Wendy to have him take the deal. Although Wendy wasn't aware of this deal, she plays it off like she knew the whole time. Agent Miller tells her how good this would be for the family, but Wendy says, let me get this straight. If he pleads guilty, he's a convicted felon, correct? And Miller says yes. And convicted felons can't hold casino licenses, correct? And Agent Miller says that is correct. And that's where the conversation ends. Later that day, though, Ruth finally regains consciousness, and both Wendy and Marty head to the hospital. And Wendy brings up the deal to Marty, but he says, I wasn't going to bring it up to you because I wasn't going to take it. Although Wendy thinks that's complete bullshit. When they enter the room, Ruth wants vengeance. She wants them to kill Frank Cosgrove Jr. They tell her that can't be done and that they've cut ties with the Casey mob and they'll never be bothered again, but Ruth doesn't think that's good enough. She says if this was Charlotte sitting in the bed, it wouldn't even be a conversation. My dad barely touched your boy and he was killed. Wendy tries to remind her how shitty of a person her father was, but Ruth doesn't want to hear excuses. She wants to see results. Ruth is released the next day and Ben takes her home and they're met at the house by Wyatt. And Wyatt apologizes for not visiting her in the hospital and lets her know how much he would miss her if she did in fact die. But he tells her that he can't be around her as long as she's with the birds because they change people. He also lets her know that he wants to forgive her so bad, but he's just not there yet. Thank you so much for watching this recap of Ozark, not Ozarks. People get really upset when you put the S on it. If you don't see the next video up in the corner there on the end screen, don't worry, it'll be up shortly. Please consider subscribing to this channel, liking this video, and there's a share button for a reason.